Hunter Schultz, and welcome to Winning Healthcare Food Fights Without the Mess. My guest this week is a physician who went to Paraguay's interior to find himself. He came back a changed man and a better doctor, in my opinion. That first trip 7 years ago sparked something within him, too. He learned far more about himself than sitting in his practice in Hampden, Maine. The plane ride back home was an epiphany of sorts. You'll learn why, starting right now. Thanks for joining me, Dr. Jack Forbush.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Pleasure being here.
Well, time is short, and I appreciate your time. I'm really interested in jumping in and asking you to unpack the Andrea Ritz Clinics in Paraguay. The backstory.
Sure.
How did that happen? Did someone just, get out the world map, throw a dart, and go Paraguay? Cool. What was that about?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story of how I became involved. Prior to transitioning my practice to direct primary care, I had left the local big box healthcare organization and started a routine private practice. And shortly thereafter that, I began caring for a young lady, and I don't know, probably maybe half a dozen visits in, we just started talking about international medicine and things of that nature. And she said to me, "Had you ever thought about actually doing this? Going somewhere on a medical mission trip?" Well, making a long story short, they had an ulterior motive. And that's that she and her husband founded the Andrea Ritz Clinic in Paraguay. And they had a physician from maybe 45 to 60 minutes from me who had been going with them for several years, but was trying to kind of phase out. So they were looking for a replacement. And I said, "Sure, let me know when I can go." And it was not long thereafter that I get the formal invitation, and have been going down for, I guess, 7 years or so now. But it's George and Silvia Ritz are the ones that founded the Andrea Ritz Clinics of Paraguay, after naming it after their daughter. And George they had both been in the Peace Corps for a number of years in Paraguay, so they had a lot of familiarity with the culture and the people. Of course, they knew a lot of folks. And when they moved back to the States after the Peace Corps stint had ended, they just still had this real love for the Guarani, or the folks of Paraguay, which is ultimately what led them to establishing a clinic in honor of their daughter. And so they had been going down for several years before I became involved. And then I, in essence, replaced the doc that was phasing out. And like I said, I've been going down there for about 7 years or so. And just, I can understand why they love the Guarani, the folks of Paraguay. It's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people, let's put it that way. So that's how I got rooked in. I got suckered into it. And truth be told, they were a little nervous about my first trip, because they said, "Oh, he'll never want to go back once he gets down there." And within a few days of being down there, I said, "So when are we coming down again? Like, are we coming back in 3 to 6 months or something?" No, we do it annually. I'm like, I really don't mind coming back in 6 months or whatever. So that's kind of how I got roped into. I say roped in. How I got the pleasure of dealing with working with the Andrea Ritz Clinics of Paraguay.
So they're out in the Campo, which is the Indian.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah.
They're out in the Campo with all the indigenous folks, or the Guarani. There are multiple tribes, but all the Guarani. We obviously land in Asuncion, and then we've got a several hour trek off to various areas. So San Juan Nepomuceno, for example, or that entire region.
So the cultural things, I can relate a little bit to what we have here in Panama. I remember one of the doctors at the Children's Hospital here told me that when I met with him about doing evacs for children in the Darien, which is, if you think the jungle's thick anywhere in the world, well, it's the thickest in the Darien. They call it the Darien Gap for a reason. But the indigenous people there, the tribes, have been for a long time suspect of Western medicine. So he
Yes.
said one of the biggest challenges they had was convincing the local witch doctor, if you will,
Yep.
medicine man,
Mhm.
uh, put him on the helicopter, get him on the plane, and let's get him to the hospital and cure this whatever. And
Yeah.
they were
Dead set
really.
against it.
Do you find them
Uh,
more
I will
receptive
tell
there?
you, well, I think, George, of course, had been going down for several years before I became involved. And he had this kind of working relationship. Having said that, there were still areas that we were going to that he had not yet exposed himself to. So there is, so I'll speak about my personal experience. So the first day I personally arrived, they're all looking at me suspect.
Yeah,
you know, like
sure.
what is this? Who is this? They might have they might have seen George in passing with Cesar, who's our contact down there, but who is this guy? So um, but I will tell you that over the years of going down and meeting people, seeing this tribe, who then see this tribe, and then connect to this tribe, it's been it has been a very warm reception. Now that you kind of break down that barrier, but they do have cultural beliefs which can be challenging at times, but they've learned to understand that we're trying to be cooperative. We're not this is not a fight against two medical systems. So they're very receptive to what we have to offer, and in particular, one of the things that they're most receptive of, which they had no experience with prior to my journeys down there, is osteopathic manipulative treatment.
Hmm.
They had never, the best of my knowledge, I don't think a DO has ever set foot in the country until I got there.
Wow.
So this whole different approach was completely foreign to them. And I think that on some level, I think that did help to break down the barrier, not just the physical touch, but the ability to affect change without the Western medicine, if you will,
Yeah.
with a way of kind of collaborating with them. I think that broke down quite a few. I'd like to think it broke down quite a few barriers. And
Odds are
um,
higher.
yeah,
Odds are
yeah.
higher it
So
did.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not just the Western doc, but I'm kind of like a different Western doc, if that makes any sense. Like
It
yeah,
does. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just
But
kind of a
I
different.
I get it because living in a foreign country,
Yeah,
and you were going to a developing world country, which also brings in some other good questions. But directly related to what you were doing there, uh, what what kind of medicine did they have out in the Campo? I mean, I gather you were going
right.
out in some real out of the way places.
Over the course of my tenure, if you will, um, and actually, so just prior to me coming on, they had a fairly well established physical clinic that is still there and still operational, and building some kind of further outlying clinics. They had a fairly routine supply of things like immunizations. There are, I say this somewhat sarcastically, they have medicine available, but it's mostly starch. It's mostly inert ingredients.
Mm,
So they might have, say, access to a named substance that has the same name as our blood pressure medication or whatever, or our antibiotic or something. But it's really, for all intents and purposes, a tic tac. So a lot of what we have brought down have been Americanized medication, ones that have a full potency and dose. So, having said that, those have been primarily restricted to the established physical structures. When we are out in the Campo and out wherever, they don't have access to anything.
who are the
So,
doctors? I mean,
well,
what are they
yeah.
called? Is it a man or a woman? Because some cultures it's women who do that.
Well,
But
actually, they have a mix of both. So
ah,
our contact there, Cesar Fernandez, he's I guess we would he calls himself a nurse, but it would really be more like a combination physician assistant nurse practitioner for us
mm,
here. He had been a surgical OR nurse in the city for a number of years, and then became kind of the head of the minister of health province or department. I forgot exactly what the term that they use. So he is, for all intents and purposes, he is their doctor. Now, at these clinics, they will have officially, formally trained physicians that might have been maybe trained in Cuba or trained in Spain or something of that nature, that then come back and provide some semblance of medical care. But what the people have learned is that the availability of those physicians has been sparse at best. Now, we have two clinics in particular that we have really been able to partner with, two women from those areas that have a very vested interest, Dolly being one of them. And so that's been a pretty, a fairly steady constant, if you will. But up until the time that they moved back to the area, they would have clinic hours, but no one would ever show up because the doctor was never there. So, so when we got there, I mean, I have days where we had 150 people. You'd get to the church, or you get to the school, or you'd get to the makeshift clinic, and there'd be nobody there. And by the time you walk back out of the clinic, the word has spread, and there's 150 people waiting for you.
Far cry from your DPC clinic.
Yeah, right. And they would bait, and we would be there, well into the night, because these folks have traveled a distance, or they find out we're going to be at the next spot and they call their family. The family gets bussed in from wherever. So we've become a relative constant for them, let's put it that way, in an otherwise erratic presence for physicians.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and once a year? I mean,
yeah. Yep.
I mean, yearly checkup, but you're also
well. And the nice thing about all this technology now is that I can communicate with Cesar, for example, or George can communicate with Cesar virtually in real time. So there have been days where my WhatsApp will ping off and I see an EKG sitting there, or he'll ask about X, Y, and Z. So it really has the ability to communicate electronically with them has really enhanced over the past couple of years, which in turn, I mean, I'm not physically there, but I am there at the very least remotely. Which has been very helpful.
Medicine. There's a couple of things that just popped into my head. Number one, Dr. Samir Kamar's got his MedWand, which when I don't know if it's approved yet, but that could be a godsend.
Yeah, I don't think it's been approved yet, but then again, who knows with all of the approval things.
Yeah, well, between cell phones and what you're able to do with attachments, it's amazing. Pulse oximeters are cheap.
Oh yeah.
The diagnostics have come down in price. I think it is a lot like you being there. And there's also a fellow who is, I'm going back about 10 years, and I wish this had popped into my head before the show, but he was at the time a research scientist, inventor, if you will, at MIT, if memory serves. And what he was building, they were medical devices for the third world. And they were very simple devices. And they were easy to ship, very light. They were not expensive. Because a lot of people don't realize that when you send expensive stuff out into the jungle, it doesn't work very long, or all of a sudden parts starts disappearing.
Or it never makes it there.
That too. It fell off the FedEx flight. When, I don't know. But.
Well, I mean, even just shipping things, because they don't have a postal service per se. They have, some parcel delivery, but where we go, we could ship something down that may not actually get to the people for 3-6 months. By the time it arrives in Asuncion, it goes to this person's house, and then they make a contact with that person, contact here. It can take months for something to actually arrive. So I have a childhood friend who works for Lenovo, and donated a few years ago, donated one of the yoga laptops. And so I took that down myself, And but after a few months of banging around in the back of a truck or trying to find a place to plug it in, the AC adapter breaks. Well, you can't just go around the corner to your next Best Buy and pick up another device.
Amazon has a
Fortunately,
different meaning down there.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, I mean, but that's a good example of how it forces ingenuity when you have to kind of makeshift, for example, a power adapter, or even, on my end as a physician, you have to, you've, you've really got to be creative in how you manage any medical condition for that matter, or even how you manage injuries and trauma down there. So folks fall off the motorcycle, or they get kicked by the horse, or, I mean, I've had people come in with broken arms that they were there. They broke them a month ago or 2 months ago. So how you manage that,
Wow.
requires a great deal of ingenuity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Creativity in action.
yeah,
So are there,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean, logistics is a barrier to care. How about culturally? What do you think about the cultural barriers?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, they've been fairly accepting of me being down there now, and of course, prior to me, George being down there. So there's a fair amount of acceptance, unless it's a new area that we're going to. So for the past year or two, we've been trying to increasingly go into more remote areas. Um, the cultural piece that I guess I didn't really appreciate, but I do now, is some of the tribal infighting, if you will, or fighting between tribes. Um, that creates its own little animal, if you will. So they might label you as this tribe's doctor. Why are you coming to us? You're coming to us to poison us, or something of that
Right.
nature. So there are some of those psychological barriers that need to get that have been a challenge to break down. Um, and then just the whole just different mindset, if you will. So, for example, if the wind is blowing this way, then that means that the symptoms are related to the wind blowing this way. Or, I have kidney pain because my kid had worms. Or a lot of those kind of cultural beliefs that are really hard to break.
Hmm.
Um, and with the exception of the ladies that we've been partnering with over the past few years, many of the um, many other physicians, if you will, I use that term loosely. Um, I think there's certainly a knowledge deficit with some of these things, um, and you can basically pay your way through medical school in Paraguay, and so you don't necessarily are up to date on the most, well, not even cutting edge stuff, but just routine routine use. Everybody gets dexamethasone with diclofenac and vitamin B12. No matter what your complaint is, everybody gets that. Or, yeah,
One size
so
fits all medicine.
what
Hey.
one size fits all, or you have microlithiasis in your kidneys and that's what's causing your ankle pain, or you know, or a lot of those things that are it's hard enough to counter the layman's cultural system, and then you add on top of that kind of this quasi medicine from some folks that those patients go see. So then just trying to break down that less than accurate information is challenge number one. And then challenge number two is, what do you do when it's time for me to leave? How do you educate them in a way that that carries forth between now and when I'm back,
Sustainable.
or sustainable? Yeah, one of the bigger things is one of the when we go to these more remote areas, talking about public health initiatives can be a real challenge. So, having water sources separate from the latrine, or having not just digging a well, but putting a wall high enough that the chickens don't get down into the well, or things that we kind of
Filthy
take for
creatures.
granted. Yeah, things that we might take for granted. It's just not something that they've necessarily been raised with, because they have a completely different culture. Having said that, they're incredibly their ingenuity sometimes is pretty amazing when you say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And the way that they've done it, necessarily make a whole lot of sense to us, but it makes sense to them and it works perfectly fine. So
Country engineers. It's amazing what,
you
yeah, I
better
mean,
believe
human
it.
ingenuity. Um,
Yeah.
it is one of our attributes. Is there's some innate, I mean, not everyone, obviously, but here's a question for what advice would you give for other doctors who are either considering this or are about to do it? What would you say to them other than bring lots of deep woods off? That's not a paid commercial.
Not a big commercial.
It is definitely used down here.
Yeah. Expect well, I guess number one is you have to be ready, willing, and prepared for the things that you're not ready, willing, and prepared for. So you can think that you're prepared for everything under the sun, when in fact, when you get there, all of those preconceptions, just most of those preconceptions, are thrown out the window. You also have to get outside of our medical industrial complex model. You have to be willing to be creative. You have to be willing to not necessarily think on your feet, but sort of definitely think outside the box. You have to be willing to collaborate with the different cultural differences rather than dictating to them. Perhaps the most important thing is for docs that are thinking about doing this, just do it.
Yeah.
Stop thinking about it. Just do it.
Is
You know,
there
the
one
heart,
is there one
heart,
item that you wished you had? I mean, maybe it was your first or second time, but there's one thing that you said, "Oh, definitely, gotta have this. It's my Swiss Army knife."
well, stethoscope for one, but we had plenty
Yeah.
of those. Um, not necessarily one particular item per se, other than the ability to do things with instruments you might not necessarily have. So, for example, doing some type of incision and drainage, or something like that with a scalpel that doesn't have a handle, or the knowledge of using cognac or rum as an anesthetic and as a cleansing agent. Let's put it that way.
Internally and externally.
Internally and externally.
For
Yes,
the
you better
doctor
believe
too,
it.
right? Yeah,
You
afterwards.
better believe it. So I don't know if it's a tool per se as much as the tool inside your head.
But you know what?
We'll,
You're
yeah,
That's really interesting because you're kind of giving a real big clue as to why doctors do this. It gives them a
yeah,
chance to break out of that thing that they're in. And I think a
yeah.
lot of them are in it right now. Obviously, they're in a brand new world when it comes to COVID-19. But I think there're going to be some people saying, maybe going out to the jungle is interesting.
Well,
Get out of there.
so, folks can joke about the most powerful tool a physician has is the pen or the stethoscope or the this or the that. That's not why patients come to see us. They don't come to see us because we've got a $300 stethoscope or the magic pen or the whatever. They come to us for this thing inside our skull. That's why people come to us.
And the
And we get
conduit,
in
the
the
ears,
conduit.
listening
Yeah,
to the patient, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Um,
They relate to
so
that there, I'm sure.
well, so then that reminds me of the one, now that you've prompted my noggin to move around. The one thing which I have kind of pieced together over time is, there is no translator or really accessible dictionary for the various Guarani dialects.
Mm.
So it's a hard language to learn, and it's a hard language for Americans anyway, I think, to speak. And then there are a variety of dialects that kind of move back and forth that can make it a real challenge. So I guess if I had the magic wand, if you will, it would be one of those magic translators that someone just speaks into and automatically, pardon me, picks up their dialect. But uh,
Star
having
Trek.
said that, yeah, having said that, um, I've been able to really put a lot of things together just by listening to the way somebody talks, watching their body language, and you can really put two and two together. And then these things, the hands, examining the patient, listening to the patient, really getting a more comprehensive examination without the reliance upon an echocardiogram or a this or a that or some kind of nifty new tool. Like I said, patients come to us because of what's in our head,
Yeah.
and the listening part.
What do you recall from, I mean, your first trip there 7, 8 years ago, from your first trip to your last trip? Has it been constant or have there been changes?
Well, I will admit that, when I came back from my first year, and my wife, who's not here, but you're more than welcome to interview her because she probably has a more colorful way of describing it. I was a very angry person when I came back. Not angry at anything specifically, but really angry at our own healthcare system. That there were, and what our expectations are as healthcare consumers for the magic pill, the magic test, the magic this, the magic that. I say angry because I really don't know any other emotional word to put in there. Maybe internal angst or
Frustration.
frustration, righteous indignation, or whatever. Where these, the folks that I had interacted with had, they had either had a medical condition that they weren't able to have addressed, or didn't have addressed, or was addressed incorrectly, and they might have had this for months on end. And I come back in the U.S. and a patient calls and says, "I've had a cold for 4 hours. What are you going to do for me?" It's like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So
Dial 1-800, you're hurting me.
yeah, exactly. You don't have a worm coming out of a body orifice that has robbed you of 50 pounds. Consider yourself lucky. Your nose, if that makes any sense, it's sort of like that.
Oh, yeah.
And really, angry is not the right word, I guess. Just kind of internally frustrated with just.
You have no idea how blessed you are, sir.
Yeah,
If you had a
yeah,
worm coming out of an orifice, then
exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, and it's tough to say that to a patient, right?
yeah, or just the rampant malnutrition, or
Yeah.
not having a clean water supply, or
Mm.
a lot of stuff just goes on and on and on. And I come back less that way with each trip, but just realizing how blessed we are. And people can complain about the United States all they want, all day long, particularly currently they are. But the reality behind it is it's the best country in the world. People have no idea what it's like to forage for food, or to find a clean water supply. Or now, having said that, the Guarani people are perhaps one of the most loving people I have ever come across. They are just loving people.
Yeah.
They,
You
just,
learn from indigenous communities.
they just, they've got their quirks like every other culture does, but
Right.
they would not blink twice at giving you their only shirt or pair of shoes. They wouldn't blink twice at all. And
Yeah.
for the most part, they don't blink when their neighbor, quote unquote, needs whatever, needs a helping hand, needs something. It just,
It's the
it's just
same
such
here.
a. So folks will ask, what, they always ask, what do you see down there? Of course, you see a lot of parasitic infections and worms and diabetes and trauma and all that sort of stuff. But I can tell you the one thing that I really don't see down there, for all intents and purposes, is anxiety and depression.
Doesn't surprise me, really.
Yeah, you might have a case. I can, I could probably name on one hand over the past several years how many cases of either generalized anxiety, and the depression cases were mostly maybe postpartum, after they've had a child or something. But even the other psychiatric illnesses, the community really manages very well. But I really don't see a whole lot of anxiety and depression. So of course it's rampant here because everybody's going to have the next new iPhone or the next,
Yeah.
great new pair of shoes, or they're watching, 24/7 news cycle, and Armageddon is coming again. And, this person's evil and that person's evil. Yeah.
I tell young business school students, one of the best things that you could do is go out go pick a country, go to the beach, set up a, rent flippers and snorkel gear, and do it for 6 months to a year. And you
Right.
will learn more about business. You will learn more about yourself. You will learn more about empathy. You will have one heck of a resume, because if I'm a hiring guy, and I've got gray hair now, so if I'm hiring someone and I've got basically 2 candidates, and one has gone to the Campo and really, and failed miserably. Doesn't matter if you
Doesn't
succeed, if
matter.
it is the fact that you did it, number one. And number two is the fact of what you learned. And if you're able to articulate that, you are golden. You've got a golden CV as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to take that person, get out
So
and learn.
I get, I probably have, I'm at a current gap at the moment, but I generally have 1 or 2 medical students in the office every month. And I encourage each and every one of them. It doesn't have to be Paraguay. It could be it could be northern Vermont. Okay. It doesn't, you don't necessarily have to leave but get out and just experience something different than what you have been experiencing.
Be the fish out of water.
You better believe it. Yeah.
It's truly remarkable how much you learn about yourself. I mean, I can speak personally to that. Dr. Jack Forbush, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And,
thank you.
Good luck to you. I want to include how people can donate to the foundation.
Yep.
And I'll have links and also to your practice up there in Maine.
For their Andrea Ritz Clinic, it's Andrea Ritz Clinics of Paraguay. You can find that right on searching on through Facebook, and you can donate. The information will be there. As far as my practice, it's ocfm.com. I got in on the URLs quickly, so I have a nice little four letter URL. And
you did.
That'll lead you to our Twitter account, which is OCFM, and our Facebook page and our email, all right through that website.
Thank you. Thank you again. And for Winning Healthcare Food Fights, this is Hunter Schultz. Until next time, stay healthy, wash your hands a lot, and there you are.